You are listening to the Therapists in the Hot Seat podcast with your hosts, Tom Coates and Tom Holland-Pearse.
Hello and welcome to the Therapists in the Hot Seat podcast. This is the podcast that works to increase awareness around topics within mental health and also to provide advice, support and guidance in an accessible way, whilst also having a little bit of fun along the way. So welcome back. My name is Tom Coates and I'm joined as always by my wonderful colleague and friend, Tom Holland-Pearse. Would you like to say hello, Tom?
Hello, everyone.
Hello, good morning. So, firstly, I just wanted to start off by saying a huge thank you to everybody who's been listening, everybody who's been engaging with our social media, everybody who's been dropping us messages, or if not dropping us messages, sending messages to our guests and things like that, and engaging and getting involved. We've just found out we've just hit 2,000 streams of our episodes, which when we first started this out, Tom, felt, very far away, didn't it? And felt almost impossible. So that's amazing. And thank you for listening. And we hope that we can keep bringing content that you find helpful. That also puts us within the top 25% of all podcasts as well. And I don't know if that's something we should be proud of or not, Tom. I'm sure there's lots of people who, have very strange, interesting podcasts out there. But here we are in the top 25%. I think we might have lost Tom. So I'm sure he had something to say there, but I'll wait for him to come back. Oh, you're back, Tom. Welcome back.
Sorry, I had a bit of Wi-Fi wobble.
No problem.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say on that point, do you remember when we first started this and we were looking at, not to diss other podcasts, of course, but we were looking at other stats and people would get like 10 views a week. And we didn't really know what to expect. I didn't know if 10 a week was good or not. But we seem to we get hundreds. Across the various things, and it's such a it's humbling, I think.
It is humbling, and
really,
we are
humbling.
very, very, very grateful for that. And yeah, we hope that we can keep you engaged. So thank you so much. So as always, we start our podcasts and continue them following a CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy agenda. So we'll start with our check-in, if that's okay with you, Tom. Mm-hmm. How are you? How have you been?
Yeah. God. Well, last week I had a relatively quiet week at work, which was lovely, and I found myself I was sleeping loads, but it felt like quite a good way. I was getting like 9 hours sleep. Sorry if I know you're a parent of a young child. This is probably just rubbing it in. And I'd even be like falling asleep on the sofa whilst I was watching TV, and I just felt like when it's over Christmas, you catch up on your sleep debt. I feel like I've been catching up on my sleep debt a little bit, which has been just blissful, absolutely blissful. And this week have a bit of a chesty thing going on, so I'll try to mute my microphone if ever I'm coughing. But no, apart from that, I think things are going pretty well. Thanks. Life's ticking on.
Great stuff. Yeah, I also, when I was ill a couple of weeks ago, I found myself just sleeping all the time, and I find it really hard to sleep in the day. I find it quite hard to sleep at night sometimes, but in the day, I find it really difficult. And I was just dropping off, and obviously it was part of my body healing. So obviously you needed that, Tom.
Yeah. How have you been anyway? What's been going on for you?
Yeah, still recovering, unfortunately. I said to you before we started, I'm kind of shoving vitamin C down my neck, trying to get rid of this congestion. But
week 3 of your illness, isn't it, you were saying?
Oh, week 3 or 4, I don't know.
That's exactly. Crazy. That's really crazy.
I mean, yeah, it's been a rough one, but I'm hoping coming out the other end of it now and feeling a little bit brighter and better. Otherwise great. Work is going really well. Home is going well. We just booked a holiday yesterday.
Amazing.
My wife kind of held me at gunpoint and said, you can't keep working like this. And I said, yeah, you know what, I agree. And it kind of broke all of my rules. I thought I've got to kind of work all the time, and we've got to pay the mortgage, and we've got to keep our clients happy and do everything for everybody. And I've kind of realized that actually what I need to do is go and sit on a nice secluded island for a week in the sun with some all-inclusive treats.
I've never had an all-inclusive holiday, but it's so on my to-do list at some point.
Yeah. Well, we compared it because last year we went away and I did a bit of work whilst I was away. But to do that, we had to have an Airbnb.
Yeah.
And that when you think about car hire, the place, the flight, it all adds up. Actually, all-inclusive was only like £100 more, really.
Yeah.
Definitely, it takes a lot of stress away.
How are you gonna deal with not checking your emails whilst you're on holiday?
Well, we've purposefully, I don't know if I did this on purpose or not, actually, but we've actually found a place where there's very little internet. So we're going to Cape Verde, which I don't know if you know where Cape Verde is. It's off the west coast, west coast of Africa, on the way towards the USA, really. So it's an island or a bunch of islands slap bang in the middle of the Atlantic.
Wow.
And as a result, I imagine there's not much phone signal. So, internet primarily comes from Wi-Fi and infrastructure. So I think you can get Wi-Fi in the lobby. so I think what I'm going to do is maybe once a day when Hugo's having a nap, venture up to the lobby and check my emails and reply to anything urgent. But otherwise, I'm really looking forward to just down tooling, if I'm honest.
Nice. Is it so obviously it's like probably the other side of the world from Hawaii, but is it equally as desolate, in the middle of massive ocean?
I don't know. Maps are quite deceiving, aren't they? Like,
Yeah.
I think the West Wing did a whole thing on this, that maps don't actually, the world doesn't look how we think it looks.
Oh, it is flat, is it? It is flat after all.
It might be. Now we're bringing a whole new audience.
Yeah.
Welcome to Flat Earth. No, I don't know. I mean, distance is hard to tell, isn't it? I'd need to go on Wikipedia, and I haven't done my preparation for that to find out just how far out it is. But definitely, it looks a good distance away from mainland.
It always freaks me out when I look at a map of the world, which strangely I often find myself doing. I don't know why. I love Google Maps and Google Earth. I always just think, oh God, you feel so vulnerable just on this little spit of land in the middle of the ocean.
Exactly. And our brains really struggle to understand scale. That's often why maps are drawn the way they are. So if you look at one, if the continent of Africa, if it's at its widest point is from west to east is actually further, it's bigger than it is from sort of Spain through to the end of Russia. But yet on the map, Spain to the end of Russia looks huge. So it's interesting how it's all kind of put out. Anyway, sorry guys, we just got stuck in geography there for a moment. But very much looking forward to that holiday. But and it's only like 6 weeks away, so I'm really excited.
Alrighty, let's get into this topic then, shall we?
Yes. So we made it. I just want to say we made it to this topic. I kind of tested
it's the cursed topic, isn't it?
Cursed one. So I kind of tested some magical thinking at the end of our last session because I said, we'll see you in 2 weeks unless I break my leg or something. And I've just sort of been wondering with my OCD if that's going to will that into happening. It hasn't. My legs are still very much intact. So we've got the relationship OCD topic. And it's such an important topic, Tom. I think you'll agree. Just because OCD is so misunderstood. It's not really the popular media-esque version of just being very tidy and orderly. That can be one type of OCD, but it's not just because we want to be orderly, it's because there'll be consequences if we're not. And relationship OCD can be really quite debilitating for people. These worries about, are these doubts that I have about my relationship usual, or are they beyond that? Are they being informed by something else? So it can be a really difficult thing for people. People can find themselves sort of on eggshells in their relationship, worrying about lots of different things. So hopefully we'll look at all of that today and think about what relationship OCD looks like, how we know if we're struggling with it, and what we can do about it.
I think it's one of those OCDs where people could feel, if it's about, say, something like hand washing. Well, actually, maybe I wouldn't compare them, but I think with the relationship OCD, I could see there might be a lot of shame held in that. Like, because no one wants to have relationship difficulties. No one wants to be going through these big, difficult questions in their minds. I could see that it could actually hold people back from accessing support quite a lot.
Yeah. And we're going to talk a little bit about OCD and how it presents now, but often the worries and the intrusive thoughts we have are often against what we actually want. So you may have heard the term ego dystonic, Tom, which means the obsessions or intrusions we have actually go against our moral values and our value sets. And with relationship OCD, that's often what we see, is that people really want to be happy in relationships with companions, and maybe they really love this person they're with and they really don't want to lose that, or maybe they don't want to be abandoned or alone for the rest of their days, and their OCD then uses that against them and says, oh well, this could happen, right? And that can then lead to that shame because people are then doing things like checking their partner's mobile phones and stuff like that. Not because they want to be creepy or anything like that, but just because they're trying to find any evidence to support or disconfirm the intrusions they're having. And that then causes other sort of trust issues as well. So I see a lot of shame coming in from that angle as well.
Yeah, because people aren't necessarily proud of, like you said, you caveated that not to be creepy, because there is a part of that which feels a bit creepy, right? So they're ashamed of the compulsion that they have to do because of the connotations of what that could also look like.
Exactly. And we'll talk more about this in a moment and structure this a bit more, maybe run through some examples. But the compulsions that come with OCD are so debilitating for people. This idea of seeking reassurance, for example. Oh, you're a bit late back. Who were you with? I was just with my friend. Am I not allowed to be with my friend? Oh no, of course you are. Of course you are. I was just checking. And we get that short-term relief. But our little gremlin, which is our OCD, then says, okay, so we're only okay this time because we got that relief. I mean, we don't know what happens all the rest of the time, do we, Tom? So let's check this out and let's keep seeking that reassurance. So OCD is a condition that's characterized by people experiencing unwanted intrusive thoughts, which can often be called obsessions. And sufferers of OCD will assign a meaning to those thoughts. They will think, because I'm having this thought, it must be important, or it must mean something, or maybe my mind knows something that I don't know. And therefore, because we assign that meaning to it, it causes some anxiety. And because we then feel anxious, and because we don't really want that meaning to be true, that's when we use our compulsions to try and stay as safe as possible, as in control as possible as well.
So are you saying kind of a big part of OCD is not just the presence of thoughts, but it's the fact we think those thoughts mean something or matter to a degree, which
absolutely.
Yeah.
You've got it spot on. And like we mentioned earlier, the thoughts that sufferers of OCD will have can vary massively, but they are almost always ego dystonic. And so they always go against our value set. And, I can almost hear some of our listeners OCD now saying, Tom said almost always. Does that mean that mine isn't? Right? That's exactly what OCD does, right? But yeah, so it's not the fact that the thoughts are there. In fact, I saw a stat a while ago, and I use it with pretty much all of my clients, Tom, that 95% of the world's population will experience intrusive thoughts at some point. 5% perhaps are unable to. Maybe they can't access their thoughts. It doesn't mean they don't have intrusive thoughts, but maybe they just can't access it. Or, perhaps there's other conditions there that mean that it isn't possible. So if 95% of the world's population are having these violent, aggressive, sexual, disgusting, scary, intrusive thoughts, then that's what that tells us, is that having the thought isn't necessarily the problem. It's that I might read a little bit too much into it, assign a meaning to it, think that it means something profound about me as well.
Got it. So they might see the thoughts as being sort of predictive, perhaps. I've had a violent or sexual thought, and therefore I'm likely to, or perhaps I secretly want to insert blank kind of thing.
Let's use that as an example. So let's imagine I'm walking down the street and I pass a female, right? And let's say the last thing I want to do is hurt anybody, whether that's sexually or not. And so when I'm sort of walking towards them, my mind will tell me, Tom, you're not going to just lash out at them, are you? You're not going to hurt them. And because I've then had that intrusive thought, I might assign a meaning to that says, oh my gosh, if I did, that would be awful. I'd have hurt somebody. I could go to prison. My life could be over. And not only that, I would be a dangerous person. I won't be accepted by society. As a result, that causes the anxiety, and that's when you'll then see the compulsions, like people giving people really wide berths. I might sort of cross the road maybe, or not leave the house as much for those reasons. So yeah, the thought pops up, and a lot of people who don't suffer from OCD will just sort of say, oh, that's an interesting thought, thank you, brain, and let that go. Whereas sufferers of OCD might think, oh dear, that means something.
What do you think so tell me if I'm jumping around the agenda points here, but what do you think gives rise to an individual? Because so 95% of us will experience intrusive thoughts, and I'll certainly hold my hands up and say I'm well in that 95.
Okay, good. I'm glad you're owning that. I think we should talk about that.
Oh yeah, for sure. We can maybe link back
Yeah.
in the session because I think it's valid to normalize this.
Yeah, I'll share some examples later of some of mine. Sorry to cut across you, but yeah, go
Awesome.
ahead.
No, absolutely. What do you think causes of that 95% people to, you mentioned they're worried about being a bad person or a dangerous person, for example. Like, why would you worry that? And why might someone also experience an intrusive thought but not see it as meaningful?
Yeah, so I think it could be a number of things, really. It could be that we are predisposed to struggling with obsessive compulsive disorder, for one,
Okay.
in that we OCD can be predicted by our genetics. Individuals who suffer from OCD may have family members who also have traits or similar difficulties, or perhaps are just more anxious than others. So there's a genetic element. There's also some studies that link this to our brain physiology as well. So I read some interesting bits about our basal ganglia being formed a little bit differently. And a recent study in 2023 as well that identified that there's increased amounts of glutamate in sufferers of OCD than non-sufferers as well. So we don't really know enough about that yet, but that could mean something. And if it does, maybe that will lead to some sort of interesting interventions. So I think there's just some things we don't ask for, Tom, that means that we give a little bit more weight and power to our intrusive thoughts. But I think as well, our environment that we grow up in, the messages we get that when we're younger, the role models we're exposed to, especially if there's trauma in our earlier life as well, and instability. I think, if I had a parent who was quite cold and maybe I had to behave a certain way in order to get validation, recognition, to be wanted, then, that can give me a message, a core belief, if you will.
I was thinking it sounds a bit core beliefy now.
Yeah, like I must be a good person,
Yeah.
So if then somebody is predisposed to OCD and they really want to be a good person, they hold that core belief, or that maybe I'm a bad person would be the core belief, and the rule is I should be a good person. Their OCD gremlin will kind of use that against them. So if you imagine OCD to be like a little gremlin that sits on your shoulder, it whispers these intrusions into your attention and says, "Oh, Tom, you really want to be a good person and just want everybody to be safe and well. Well, you could just smother your wife with a pillow while she sleeps, right?" And if I go, "Oh my gosh, yeah, you're right, I could do that," because again, another thing that predisposes us to OCD is the intolerance of that uncertainty, the idea that I don't have 100% certainty that I'm not going to do this thing. I will turn to my gremlin and say, "Oh my gosh, yeah, I could. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I would do that. What if I'm asleep and I'm out of control and this happens and that happens?" And that gremlin says, yeah, Tommy, this is really important. We should do something about this. And that's when I'll use a compulsion. So maybe I'll choose to sleep in a different room to my wife. And what I'm essentially doing is taking a cookie and giving it to my OCD. And the OCD says, "Thanks very much." And it's then going to learn to keep feeding these intrusions back in because it knows it gets recognition.
So that little gremlin's almost posing as a friend in that instance there. It's sort of, but it's not a friend because those things are unnecessary ways to act and think. Not unnecessary, but it's superfluous levels of safety that you're doing. But in that moment, it's posing as a friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's kind of I always see the OCD as the amygdala's way. So the amygdala is the part of the brain that deals with fear and safety. The amygdala's way of trying to keep you as safe as possible by scaring you with the things that you really don't want to be, or the person you really don't want to be. And it kind of thinks that if I scare you with this, then you won't act that way. But you were never going to act that way anyway. So a part of our work with the OCD is to try and parent the brain, if you will, parent that amygdala and say, "Look, thank you for being a bit overly cautious. Thank you for trying to protect me, but you're going about it the wrong way." So I've heard that gremlin referred to as many things: a friend, a bully, a demon, so many different things. But yeah, I think that's what sets us apart, really, is that it could be a genetic thing. It could be about our, environment that we grow up in, the culture that we grow up in, the messages we get, and our relationship with uncertainty as well. Some people who are quite happy bathing within uncertainty and saying, throw the uncertainty on me, doesn't matter. Other people, a little bit of uncertainty is so scary. And that is really difficult with OCD, because if you imagine, let's say I want to be a really good person and my OCD really worries me with being a terrible person, then I'll say, "Well, look, Tom, you don't know in the next 30, 40, 50 years of life you've got next that you're not going to murder somebody. How do you know that?" I say, "I don't. Well, you know what? I don't know that. I couldn't possibly know that. How do I know that?" Goes, "Exactly. So if you don't know that, you could be a dangerous person, Tom." right? So that uncertainty, that doubt is what keeps us going. So a lot of work I do with my clients is helping them develop their tolerance and willingness to accept the uncertainty. The idea that maybe I'm a murderer, maybe I'm not, but I know what my values are and I know how I feel about murdering people and hurting people. So let's just carry on living and see.
Very nice. And I suppose in the context of relationship OCD, well, you know, I don't know about you, but relationships are massively important to me. That, you know, your other half, so to speak. And I think when the scrutiny that we can be under in those moments where we're having relationships, so we might be getting married or having a child or moving in together or just what's that word they use? Doesn't matter. But becoming a couple, I can see that part of the brain that you're talking about right now could be on steroids, because like it's commitment, isn't it? And it's things that could go wrong. And like you said, like having a baby or a marriage, like all the financial stuff as well. I can see that little gremlin is having a party in moments like this. I could see that he's really, really got his voice loud and getting you to question every little aspect of this particular thing.
Exactly. So that gremlin, the OCD gremlin, for everybody, just to be clear, is choosing to pinpoint something that's important to that individual. So if somebody, I don't know, like you say, really loves their partner, really finds them attractive, really wants to be in a relationship, really wants to have companionship, then it makes sense to me that OCD would say, oh, you know, you could lose this at any point, right? Or, oh, you know that this could be the wrong one. And therefore, there's impacts and consequences of that. So yeah, relationship OCD is one of the many jackets that OCD can wear. So as we said before, it's not just about being orderly and tidy. It can be about worrying about harming people, being a sexual offender, being of a different sexuality to how I identify. And relationship OCD is just another one of those things. It's a subtype of OCD where we experience obsessive doubts and anxieties about our romantic relationships, often because they're so important to us in some way. Just before we started recording, Tom, you made a really interesting point about normalizing doubt in relationships.
Yeah. So what I was thinking, as soon as I read through these notes, the thing as a therapist I've always, I wouldn't say struggled with, but I suppose it's a little bit hard to find, is that line between what is a reasonable, normal doubt in a relationship versus clinical OCD, or on the path to clinical OCD. Because I thought, actually, isn't it so normal and natural, especially when going through big transitional stages with your other half, to actually just put it under a magnifying glass very quickly and just think, is this right? Am I happy? Am I in love? Can I see this working for the rest of my life? Are these problems that we've, inevitably got, because every couple does, too much for the relationship? And so forth and so forth. And I thought, before we pathologize all intrusive thoughts or doubts or concerns about our relationship, let's just make sure there's a space there to normalize the fact that we're all going to be doing that from time to time anyway, because a relationship, as you said, OCD loves picking on important things, and a relationship, generally speaking, is an important thing for a person. So yeah, just a bit of normalization going in there to start us off.
Absolutely. And that is so important. Relationship doubts are normal. They are healthy. I'm sure Becky would say that. Becky, our guest from last time, I'm sure she would agree that, it's important that we're aware and we don't just jump blindly into relationships, because that could lead to all sorts of difficulties, couldn't it? Like unhappiness, abuse, maybe, all sorts of other struggles. So it's important that we are doubting, questioning, and aware. But I suppose what the difference is here is that it's that excessive doubt. It's almost obsessive, and often I'll engage in long conversations with individuals who have a relationship OCD, and they're just like, well, yeah, but how do I know this? How do I not know this? How do I pick this apart? And that's what makes this trickier. If it's harm OCD, right, you kind of know that is, that intrusive thought is abhorrent, is scary to me, and the meaning is also awful. In relationship OCD, yes, it's often an unwanted thought. It goes against what I actually want, but it's not always, necessarily awful.
No, it's not disgusting or repulsive or anything like that, is it? It's quite within the realm of what people would think about normally, I would say.
Yeah, and what people see all the time on TV shows like Made in Chelsea and The Only Way is Essex and social media and that kind of thing. So it's not not abnormal in that way, but the ego dystonic nature is that, there's often a reason why OCD is targeting this relationship, whether it's about being happy, this person in particular, but having, companionship and the core warm things that come with relationships as well. So it's about picking apart where is this a usual doubt, and where is this an obsessive doubt. And a question I often ask myself, and sorry, other clients, not just myself, Freudian slip, is am I planning to do anything about this now? Am I planning to leave my partner? And the amount of people who say no. Is like, okay, right. So despite all of these excessive doubts and worries, we're not currently planning to leave our partner. So how willing are we to try and approach these excessive doubts and worries in a different way, just while we're doing this work together, and see if that enables you to settle more into this relationship?
Yeah, I suppose as well, if someone is of a OCD nature for the aforementioned reasons, they may have realized they often have relationship OCD in various relationships that they've been in, whereas like a mismatch of values with that individual, and therefore like just genuinely not the right relationship. It might be relationship specific as well. That might be a way we could tease those two things apart.
We see both. We see both, don't we? So we see people where, many relationships that might not have needed to end have ended for various reasons, due to these excessive doubts. And maybe people haven't struggled with this at all, and then they meet a certain person who they're thinking, wow, I really want to spend the rest of my life with this person. And the thought of losing that person in particular is so scary that the gremlin then targets it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there are some different types of relationship OCD, which we can talk about in a moment as well.
I always find, sorry to interrupt, just as like a little point, I always find with OCD in particular, it's so, that phrase, nature abhors a vacuum?
No, maybe I've heard that one. Say it again.
So it's just nature abhors a vacuum, and it just means like there's no space where nature won't creep in, or life won't creep in into the world. I find OCDs like that, like whatever little crevice you've got of like sanctuary, it will be like, oh, what if that's not the case? What if you don't feel like that? And it becomes so layered so quickly that of course people can end up in a real tiz with their gremlins in their minds in these moments.
Absolutely. Really good point, Tom. And that's another thing, right? The relationship is often what's important to this person at this time. A lot of people I work with who've had relationship, or who are coming to see me for relationship OCD, this isn't their first rodeo. They've also had at various times in their life, before relationships were even a thing, maybe during their childhood, they've been more checking, or they've worried about other things, or worried about their sexuality, or, it often will have shifted themes to certain points. So that's another indicator, really, that this is maybe just another way my gremlin is trying to protect.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So a lot of people might be out there thinking, okay, well, hey, I sometimes have doubts about relationships, but what is relationship OCD? So there's a few different types of relationship OCD. So one of the first ones is partner focused. That's where we will be kind of experiencing intrusive thoughts about our partner. What if I'm not attracted to them? What if they're not funny enough? What if they aren't the right person for me? Do I really like them? We might really zoom in on their flaws then, and seek, reassurance from friends or family. We might test our feelings of attraction as well. So it can be very much focused on our partner. It can also more generally be based on the relationship. So what if I'm settling here? What if this isn't the right relationship for me? And again, that can be comparing of relationships to past ones, seeking reassurance from your partner or from friends, and that kind of thing. So it could be very general to the relationship itself, or it could be about the sexual aspects of relationships. So what if I'm not sexually attracted to my partner? What if I find someone else's partner more attractive? What if I find that person more attractive? Or, oh my gosh, I do find that model more attractive. Maybe that this means this isn't right. Yeah. So that's when we're looking for proof and anything to kind of confirm or disconfirm our fears there. The fourth one, which I don't really tend to see as often, but I have seen it, is kind of the ethical side of relationship OCD. The idea that if this isn't the right partner, then I'm leading them on, or I'm agreeing to be sexually active with them, even though I inside truly don't think they're the right person for me. So then it can bring up really sort of ethical issues like, oh my gosh, am I an abuser? And am I an abusive person? Am I deceptive?
I can totally see that moral or ethical ROCD being about almost a bad person.
Yeah.
I can really see it because this is what I mean about it being so sneaky and conniving and just gets into
Yeah.
these little gaps. Is that to me, that's like, it's almost like I'm almost impressed by the
Oh yeah.
nicheness of that form of OCD. Like, what if I'm abusing my partner because I'm having sex with them and I'm not really into them and they deserve to have someone that loves them? And I mean, that's such a worry chain of OCD. It's almost impressive
Yeah.
that the brain could take you there, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. And when you really, if you put all of our concerns with OCD in a boiling pot, like simmered it all down, it often comes down to the similar core fears. That idea of, I don't know, hurting somebody or being attracted to a child or something like that would mean that my whole life is ruined. And maybe, if I lost this person, my whole life would be ruined, or maybe if I led this person on, I would be a bad person. So often kind of when you boil it down will lead to the similar core fear as well.
I just wanted to interject very quickly, Tom. It's something
Yeah.
you've already said, but there's something we do a lot in CBT, which has got many, many, many names. I tend to call it an ABC model, but I think there's other variants of what you can call that. It's a vicious cycle, basically. And just to help understand some of those things that we've just mentioned, it's quite easy to imagine. So if you imagine in your mind, you've got 3 bubbles just floating in the air. One has got the letter A, and that's going to stand for autonomic symptoms. One's got the letter B, and that's going to stand for behaviors. And one's got the letter C, and that will stand for cognition. Think of it a bit like this. When let's just say it starts at cognition arrives and the intrusive thought comes in. Let's say, what if my partner isn't attractive, smart enough, or funny enough for me? What that will happen, a bit like a domino effect, is that thought will then roll into a kind of a fight and flighty or an emotional state. So you might have like a peak of adrenaline or anxiety, all the sweatiness or tenseness, all those sorts of things. And then following the domino effect round into the B bubble is our response to that thought and autonomic activation, which is something usually to calm or quell the feeling or the thoughts that we've just had. So that's why we reassurance seek, and that's why we maybe avoid or research or check or, whatever else we tend to do. And then the whole problem with that domino effect is it loops right back round into the core cognition, because then you sort of come to the point of, thank God I checked because that kept me safe in that moment, or thank God I reassurance sought because now I know that a little bit more. And it just means you're much more likely to experience that sort of cognition again in response to that trigger. So the reason I've just said that is because there's a lots of various types of our OCD here, and I think it could be useful just to break it down into its components like that to help us understand why we focus in on the behaviors and why we focus in on the cognitions in this way.
Yeah. So let's do another example of that then, Tom. Let's use an example we haven't used yet. So let's say, I'm trying to think of one without nicking one of my clients because I don't want to do that. Let's use the one I used earlier. Let's say a partner has been out for a night out with their friends. Yeah. So we've been sat at home and our partner has gone out for a night out. Yeah. And what we're having then is that our little gremlin on our shoulder is giving us that intrusive thought. What if someone's trying to chat them up?
Yeah.
You could lose them, right? What if they like this person more than you? What if they find this person more attractive than they find you? What if something happens? And, that can then lead to a meaning like, oh my gosh, my partner being out could lead to something happening. I could lose this relationship. I could lose them. Which means that's the autonomic nature. Sorry, that's the cognitive nature. That leads to the autonomic nature, that anxiety of, oh my gosh, my heart rate is now flying. I'm feeling really, really anxious and entering fight or flight. And that's when we don't necessarily act in a wise way. And that's when we'll use our compulsions. So, maybe text my partner and say, are you having a good night? Who's there? Can you send me a picture, please? And when they get back, maybe I'll sort of say, did anyone try it on? Did anything? And that can put sort of, that when they say, no, it's fine. It was just me and Diane. We just had a laugh and a bottle of wine. I could then go, oh, thank goodness. But as you say, it accidentally reinforces that meaning.
Yeah.
Because our gremlin then says, okay, well, look, we got away with that one, Tom.
Yeah.
But
thank God you checked. Let's check
Yeah.
again next time.
Yeah, and how are you going to cope next time?
Yeah.
You're not. So when it says, oh, I'm meeting Diane again next week, you go, oh, haven't we got a thing on next week? And it leads to that kind of cascade, which then can leave partners feeling, quite restricted, untrusted.
Yeah.
And that's the parasitic nature of OCD, right? Is that people can often push things into happening because of the way they're acting, trying to make ourselves feel better by completing compulsions. And what I'm doing is accidentally pushing my partner away. Yeah. So that partner then says, okay, well, I don't know if I can be in a relationship with somebody who doesn't trust me. Yeah. So that can be one of the really scary parts. And that then leads to an increase in the OCD again. Yeah. Sorry, I think we lost you for a second there, Tom. You back?
Yeah, I think it's I've got a really good Wi-Fi signal. I don't really understand. I've got a lot of 256 megabyte thingy. But anyway, sorry. It's okay. It's just a bit wobbly.
Don't worry about it. Okay. So, there could be, I suppose, a few things as well, just to mention that could be reasons why people will struggle with relationship OCD particularly. And that could be, like we talked about, the genetic element, the messages we get when we're younger, but also other things like the past relationship traumas. Perhaps people have been misled, deceived, abused before in relationships, and therefore their gremlin is saying, oh, look, Tom, this happened before, this could happen again, right? So past relationship trauma can also contribute to this. It could also be things like social media. If you're scrolling through and you see sort of triggers around that could lead you to doubt things, but also the pressures from our world. This Hollywood view that relationships should be amazing and fulfilling all the time. That we should be infatuated with our partner. We should find our partners attractive all the time. And if we don't, then that's a sign that something's wrong. Right. So we've got to be really careful with that and watch out for that Hollywood kind of romantic nature. And I've been reading this book actually on relationship OCD by Rajaee. I don't know if you've got it, Tom. It's very good.
No, haven't got it.
But in this book, they say that, or the author says that, this whole idea of marriage and relationships being about infatuation and stuff, it's actually quite a new concept. Previously, things like marriage was for furthering networking or furthering wealth or wealth management or that kind of thing. It was actually more of a business transaction. But as movies and stories and films are coming more into our lives, we've developed more of this Hollywood romantic view of relationships. So we've got to be careful of that and think, it's okay sometimes to look at my partner from a certain angle and not find them super attractive. That doesn't necessarily mean anything is terribly wrong. Okay. Tom, is there anything you want to add to that?
I just wanted to second really the nature of the Hollywood. I always think of Grease. You ever seen that film? I'm sure you have. That's a classic. Where they literally fly away in a car at the end of the film. Sorry, spoilers, but it did come out in the 70s. And I always think that's such an interesting way to describe a relationship. They've had their problems, they've done their battle, and now they're forever happy and enlightened and in love. And I know it makes for a nice story, but it is just so ridiculously unrealistic. And it's actually quite reassuring to hear what you've just mentioned about marriages sort of traditionally been about business or kind of family stuff, not necessarily about romance, although I'm sure that was a nice addition, but it's really about the core of it is something else. And I think that's much more achievable really, because you're not going to be able to stay infatuated with your partner. That's just ridiculous. You're not going to have happy hormones for the rest of your life at every given moment. That is ridiculous. And to expect it is to set yourself up for complete failure. And it's far better to have a fairer expectation of what a relationship will be and what it will give you and so forth. And that probably is something a little bit more maybe slightly monotonous or safe or hopefully consistent, but actually those are the things you should be aiming for, because those are the things that have longevity to them. And those flights of fancy are just going to, and if we judge ourselves by not having a flight of fancy, it's, I suppose that's where a lot of doubt can creep in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of expectation, isn't it? I must always have this infatuation. We must always be doing profound things. We must always be staring into each other's eyes. It's just not realistic, as you say. And it when you were talking, it linked back to what Becky said last time about, when we first meet a partner, we enter that liminal phase. Our happy hormones increase. Our disgust hormone, our disgust decreases. That's what she said.
Yeah.
And therefore, what we want to do is be with them all the time, have sex all the time. But then as that phase drops away, that honeymoon period, it then becomes more, seeing it in the clear light of day. And I suppose the question is there enough in this relationship for me to be happy and to want to commit to this, despite any intrusive, unwanted thoughts or worries I might have about, or unrealistic worries I might have about how things should or ought to be?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people are probably thinking, this is great, but how do we separate normal worries with actual relationship OCD? So I've got a few questions, Tom, that I might just ask. And if you are listening and you are wondering this, maybe grab a notepad and just see what you think here. So am I right just to read these out?
Please do.
Okay. So question 1, and this comes from the Rajaee book, by the way. I haven't come up with this myself. Credit where credit is due. Question 1. Are you in a loving and caring relationship where you are treated with respect and kindness? Question 2. Does your partner seem to care about and try to understand your needs? Question 3. Do they show a willingness to work on themselves when and if they miss the mark? Are you confused by doubts and negative thoughts running through your mind, given the fundamental connection that you feel with your partner? Is your relationship one in which the two members generally have shared interests and shared visions for the future? Are you experiencing thoughts about your relationship that you find intrusive or unwanted and are fundamentally against the core, warm feelings that you experience within it? Does the level of anxiety you're experiencing feel out of line with the level of real or perceived danger that dating your partner actually presents? Okay, those are the questions. So some quite tricky ones there. But the questions, some of them are designed to think about the fundamentals of the relationship, and some are actually starting to identify if these worries or doubts are mismatched with how we actually feel within it.
Yeah, I really liked the one that you mentioned about, like, is your partner, I think it was like the second or third, but is your partner loving or something like that? Was that one there?
The third one is, do they show a willingness to work on themselves when and if they miss the mark? Or does your partner seem to care about you and try to understand your needs?
Yeah, it was something around those times. But I was just thinking, how nice is that? Because those are so, um, to me, they're not that. It's not about perfection, we're not looking for a perfect relationship. If your partner can just show they're going to work on themselves and show care for your needs, I kind of don't think that's so much to ask. I think it's an achievable thing, and that just takes so much pressure out of the relationship having to be a certain way or hitting a certain standard. All you need is someone that shows love and shows support and ability to work on themselves. That to me feels so more like accessible, let's say.
Yeah, and you used the word achievable before. I think achievable, this idea that, if it's constantly Hollywood romance levels of, expectation, we're going to be let down. And I always say to my clients, I don't know if you agree with this, but relationships should be additions to ourselves. We should be, living fundamentally and independently and understand, what we enjoy and what we like and how we want life to be. And relationships should be a lovely, wonderful addition to that. If a relationship is becoming the focus, then that could mean that maybe my OCD is making it that way, or maybe I need to practice, developing that independence and tolerating that. Because just because we see the relationship as the focus doesn't mean our partners always do.
So it's kind of like what Becky was saying. Do you remember she was saying about having separate bedrooms and things?
Yeah.
To really have that it's like individual nature, but with all the strengths and the benefits of the relationship. But to have it in that way, you're very much your own person still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So people are probably thinking, okay, I've answered these questions, but what do they mean? So if you answered yes to the majority of those questions, if not all of them, then what it suggests that the relationship itself is fundamentally strong. And what it might mean is that instead of the relationship being the issue, this is more of a worry issue. I'm doubting this. I have excessive doubts about this. So that's what we're trying to aim for there, is to work out, is the relationship the issue, or are my doubts, my fears, my worries, my feelings, are they the issues? And if that's the case, then we can do something about that with the treatment of OCD.
Interesting. So just to recap that, we're teasing apart, I suppose, the gremlins whisperings versus like the reality of your relationship.
Yes.
And you can, as long as you've got enough good stuff in the reality section, as indicated by those questions, and we can kind of work on the OCD as a separate entity almost.
100%. So how willing are you, if this, now that we've been through this and looked at this, how willing are you to maybe think about seeing this as a worry condition, OCD, and approaching it that way, rather than seeing this or continuing to engage with those doubts and fears about something being fundamentally wrong with the relationship?
Got it. Very useful questions there as well, because it almost gives a benchmark for what one could realistically expect and aim for in a relationship, which is probably very different from what your OCD is telling you should be aiming for and expecting in your relationship, e.g. perfection.
Exactly.
Got it.
And it's hard because just because we know, we might answer these questions and we get the answer that our relationship is fundamentally strong, it doesn't stop those intrusions, right? OCD is the doubting disorder. So as soon as you start to get any level of certainty or feel like you're getting any progress, it'll just say, oh yeah, but what about this? Or what about that? Well, what if your relationship is different? Right. So again, it's not just because we get these answers doesn't mean the intrusion stops. So that's why we've got to think about what we do with those intrusions. I've just got to let my dog in. Bear with me.
Sure. Yeah.
Come on in, dog. Okay. So that leads us neatly, I think, Tom, into what we can do with OCD. And I'm saying OCD rather than relationship OCD because I don't know about you, but I treat relationship OCD the same way I would treat any other OCD.
Yeah.
I try not to get bogged down in the content and instead think about what is maintaining the problem. So those ABCs. So we know when we look below the bonnet of OCD, it's always maintained the same way. So with my clients, I always say, okay, you could have harm OCD at some point. You could have POCD at some point, which is paedophile fear OCD. You could have sexual orientation OCD at another point. If you imagine those, imagine you're stood in a car park and you're looking at all those cars parked up. Yeah, you've got a Mini and a BMW, for example. And we know that Sytner own BMW and Mini. If you own a Mini, Tom, and you want to get it serviced, you can take it to a BMW garage. Or if you need a repair, you can take it there. So what that means is when we look under the bonnets, even though they look very different on the outside, their body kits are very different. When we look below the bonnets, there will be many similarities within the engines, right? That means that it's not about getting bogged down in the content and what the intrusions are actually saying. It's about what we do with them. And if we can adapt our relationship with the intrusions, challenge the meanings and kind of show ourselves that, hey, it is okay to let go of these intrusions. These meanings aren't actually authentic. We then might not have to feel so anxious. And if we can then hit it even harder by reducing any compulsions and growing our confidence that, hey, I didn't check with my partner if anyone had tried to chat her up and we're still okay. Now my confidence is growing. We're starting to dismantle that OCD cycle.
Got it. Nice analogy as well, by the way. Very good.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I like that one.
Nice. Very good.
I don't know much about cars, but I know that I can take a Mini to a BMW garage so you can have one. but that's the thing, right? It looks very different on the outside. You can easily pick apart a BMW and a Mini. But when you look under the bonnet, there'll be many similarities. Some differences, but many similarities.
Okay, so I suppose the $1 million question is, how do we let go of the meanings of our intrusions and thus the need to do certain compulsive actions, do you think?
And there are so many ways to approach this, Tom. You and I probably have different ways, similar ways as well. The first thing I take my clients through is understanding our relationship with intrusive thoughts, because that's often the first point that people are getting ensnared, if you will. I always, imagine this like you're a fish in the ocean and you look up and you see a lovely bit of meat just kind of swimming along there, and you think, oh, that's really attractive. I could just go and sort that out, or I could just go and fix that, or I could go and eat that. That's the intrusion. As soon as you buy into that, you're hooked. You got the hook through the top of your mouth and you're being pulled along. So intrusions can often be enticing because they are scary, they are disgusting, they're abhorrent, that we want to go and sort it. We want to understand that it's not true. But instead, if we can begin to respond to them differently and say, oh, hey, there's an intrusion. There's an intrusive thought, rather than, oh my gosh, yeah, that could be true. Then that can often be very empowering for people. So that's where I start, is to help people detach from their intrusive thoughts. And it's that concept of diffusion that comes from acceptance and commitment therapy, Tom.
So you've got a little fish who is very prone and very likely to go and bite on all the little hooks, because that's what it always does, because it looks enticing and necessary. But we've got, I can't help but think this is a really good band name, a wise fish, which is instead going to swim along. You see the hooks are there, experience the hooks, but decide to act in a different way because it's got some wisdom that it didn't have before.
Yes. Yeah, it's like that would be, yeah, I could go and take a bite. That's exactly what everything, within me wants to do. But I know what happens when I do that. As soon as I start engaging with the discussion, I get ensnared. So I have this willingness to say, thank you so much for that intrusive thought. That's interesting, but no, thank you. One of my other clients a while ago said, this is kind of like when you're walking through a town centre and you've got people trying to get you to sign up for a charity that you don't necessarily want to sign up for. Maybe you already do your charities. And you're walking through town and they say, excuse me, sir, or excuse me, madam, could I just take a moment of your time? What's the worst thing you can do when that happens, if you really don't want to sign up?
Well, you say yes.
Yeah. You go, oh, yeah, go on then. And
yeah, go on.
Give them an in, don't you then? Or you say, one thing I get used to do, oh, no, I've got to be back at work in 10 minutes. And they'll say, it'll only take 5.
Yeah. I was flying recently, and they have them in airports these days. Right. And of course, everyone's excuse is the same, which is, I've got to catch a flight. And they always go, how long is your flight? And you say, 20 minutes, and they'll be like, this would take 2. Yeah. And it's like, that is so devious of you. You knew what my excuse was going to be. You knew I was going to try and wiggle out of it.
Yeah, exactly. So what's the best way we can start to respond to these individuals?
Politely acknowledge, politely decline, pass on by.
Yes. Thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the same. It's so hard because these thoughts are so scary and abhorrent, and I don't want to invalidate this and make it seem like, oh, okay, so we just say no, thank you. Diffusion takes training. This is a mindset. Yes. This is based in the idea that thoughts are simply things I experience and not things that need my attention. The idea that I am somebody who can have a thought without that thought having to mean anything about me. So the idea that I'm a murderer, for me, because I've developed this mindset, Tom, is the same as the thought that I am a ham sandwich. They are both thoughts. Whether they're intrusive, unwanted, scary, helpful, whatever, wanted, they're all just thoughts. And I'm somebody who can transcend that and look at all of my thoughts and say, what's going to happen if I go along with these? So this takes training, this takes practice, this idea of catching the intrusive thought and choosing to detach and to disconnect from it. So here's an example, right? My partner's out on a night out. Let's use this one for consistency. And I have the intrusive thought of, oh my gosh, what if someone's trying to chat them up? Yeah. So we've got that very scary intrusive thought. Somebody's trying to chat them up. I'm simply noticing the thought that somebody's trying to chat them up. How interesting that I'm noticing that thought that somebody's trying to chat them up. So that first thought, somebody's trying to chat them up, is very much fusion. I then, the thought pings up like a jack in the box, and here's me. I come along and I fuse with that thought. And that causes anxiety. And that then is when I want to use my compulsion. That willingness to say, hold on a minute. I'm simply having the thought that someone might be trying to chat them up. Okay, it's a thought. How interesting that I'm noticing that thought. So I've gone from being fused to gently detaching. Again, it takes a lot of willingness, a lot of commitment, and we have to take a risk. But it's that ability to say, this is a thought rather than a truth.
I think it could be where I could imagine a barrier for people here is going back to the ABC model, the affect-laden nature of
Oh,
cognition.
yeah.
And what I mean by that is when we have scary thoughts, we feel big feelings. So let's just go back to that example. If I thought my other half was out being chatted up by someone, how am I going to feel? Well, pretty scared, maybe a bit jealous, maybe.
Yeah.
Anxious for sure, maybe even annoyed they've gone out, and all that. I'm not that type of guy, really. Don't worry, but just for the example,
Don't
and
worry.
I
It's not
suppose
worry. Don't worry, everyone. We can start the safeguarding consent now.
just covering up myself there, and I suppose it's noticing I'm having the thought in that quite like meta sense, like, oh look,
Yes.
I'm having a thought. There is a thought in my mind, and I suppose feelings as well, and I'm having some feelings, and going back to some of the ACT stuff that you and I like to speak about, there's a really good thing he mentions, like a model, and he says, so you may be having scary thoughts and you may be feeling scary feelings, but the first step is to diffuse from it. So wise fish your way through it. So notice that the thoughts are there, but don't necessarily go towards them. Also, to make a lot of space for those big feelings. Again, this is training that you'd need more than a podcast episode to go through, but there's an element of being able to tolerate difficult feelings more effectively. And then the third part is, now I've done those things and defused from that experience, how do I want to act in this moment? And he says there's a choice, you're at a choice point, and you can do an away move or a towards move. So an away move is, oh, I'm just going to cave, I'm going to text them, I'm going to call them, I'm going to be anxious, I'm going to check their Facebook.
Yeah.
And of course all the fallout that comes from that. But a towards move is, which takes a lot of courage, is something like, actually, I'm just going to sit with this. I'm actually just going to know that I want my other half to have a fun evening out. And I also know that I want to have a peaceful evening in, and I want our relationship to work. So I'm going to do the right thing based on what I now know.
Yeah.
And to tolerate that and move towards it is one of the most courageous acts I think someone can do, is to sort of transcend their feelings.
Absolutely. And I've got a good book, which is the ACT book for OCD. And it basically it was one of the chapters is entitled A Commitment to Living Boldly. What we're asking people to do here is go against their automatic nature. When you're sat at home, it's so easy to, if you think about that choice point, to act ineffectively and go towards the away pulls. And be ineffective and send those messages. And maybe I'll get a short-term relief, but maybe, afterwards I'll feel a bit guilty or annoyed, or I've impacted my partner in some way. The bold step is to move effectively and to sit with that discomfort and say, okay, I'm willing to tolerate this because this step is in line with my values. I want my partner to have a nice evening. I want them to have fun. I don't want to be it's also who I don't want to be as a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, partner, whatever. I don't want to be that person. So I'm choosing to sit with this discomfort so that we can move in that direction. And you're also going to be debunking the OCD at that point, because guess what? When that partner comes back and, everything's fine the next day and you've been uncomfortable, but everything seems to be okay, that's going to help you develop your confidence as well.
I love all that. I think that's a very wise approach to difficulties in life, those things there.
Yeah, and I think it's that willingness to say, these are thoughts and feelings. These are a part of my humanity. This is a part of my experience. Just because it's a part of my experience does not mean it means anything, and doesn't mean that I have to engage with it. And that's a bold step. But if you can unlock that and say, hey, I have thoughts just like I have hands. Right? My hands help me pick things up. They help me have a drink. They help me protect myself if I fall over and I'm going to smash my face against the floor. But sometimes I get pins and needles in them and they get cold and achy. And sometimes my hands serve me and sometimes they don't. If we can see thoughts in the same way, that sometimes I have really helpful, wanted thoughts that I can, engage with. And sometimes I have really unwanted, unhelpful invasions of my attention that I don't want to have. Then I can choose which ones I engage with and which I don't. They are all a part of the cognitive events we can experience as humans.
Very nice. there's another thing. Should we just touch
Yes,
on
let's keep going.
ERP as well for
Yeah,
OCD?
absolutely. So you go ahead.
Yeah, so there's another thing that's probably the gold standard. I think it is. It certainly was for treating OCD, which is called ERP, and that's short for exposure and response prevention. And what that means is, I'll use a different form of OCD just to explain it. Let's say you had kind of germ OCD or contamination OCD. So you were really worried about the spread of infections on your hands onto other things. Let's say you were a parent and you were worried about your newborn child and you were obsessed with cleanliness. Now, what we do with ERP is you actually expose the individual to the thing that's scaring them, not just for sadistic laughs, but actually it can help your brain to sort of re-understand and reinterpret that specific stimulus. So you might get someone who doesn't wash their hands so often to still prepare lunch for their child, or to touch a non-sterilized surface and then to eat a sandwich themselves. And what you find with that is you'll get your anxiety will spike at the start of that intervention. So it will kind of go from a 0 to maybe a 60%. And what people would typically do in that instance is do their compulsions. So they would wash their hands, for example, and their anxiety would drop back down. But what we ask people to do in ERP is to resist doing their compulsion. So the anxiety spikes, they resist doing the compulsion, and what they find is their anxiety will plateau for a little bit, but then it starts to actually drop away naturally with time because of the phenomenon called habituation, which is to do with hormones, really. But basically, it means getting used to things over time the more you do them. And the reason I just wanted to pop that one in there is because it's sort of the surface level, it looks a little bit like what we've already said to do with the ACT stuff, where you stick to your guns, you do something you don't necessarily want to do because you know that it's right. And I think you can apply the ERP to that because you'll also find it gets easier over time with repetition. And those are two different models, really. I'm not sure if I'm right to blend them, but essentially, that's what will happen to that individual.
Absolutely. I always see ERP as a kind of a controlled way of doing this. There might be times when we plan to do it. There might be times when we find ourselves doing it by chance because my partner's just texted me to say she won't be home because she's going to a works dinner. Oh, crap. Oh, no, I know to sit in some discomfort. So yes, ERP is that idea that when I'm exposed to my fears, my anxiety will increase. If I use a compulsion, then I'm going to get a short-term relief, but the next time something happens, we're going to get that sharp increase again. So ERP is that willingness, again, with using that term, to sit with that feeling and to sit on my hands, literally if you need to, and surf that anxiety down. A good analogy for this, excuse me, is it's like jumping into freezing cold water. As soon as we jump in, we get that... And that's the anxiety coming up. And, what people naturally want to do is clamber out, get out, let the sun warm you up, let the towel warm you up. But what happens the longer we stay in cold water, Tom?
Well, I've never been brave enough to do it, but I hear it gets easier.
I don't believe you. Surely you have. Anyway, it becomes more manageable, and we get to debunk that myth that if I didn't use my compulsion, then bad things were going to happen. Actually, look at me. I'm swimming around in this water.
Yeah.
Sure, it's not always comfortable, but I'm swimming around in it, and then the next time we get out of that water and jump back in again, we know what to expect, and it might not feel so cold.
Definitely. So with repeated wisdom-oriented and values-driven action, you can not only start to improve your life a lot, but you can actually diminish the difficult feelings that arise in response to that.
Exactly.
And that is cooking on gas, isn't it? If you can do that, you are cooking on gas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm always in awe of many of my clients, Tom, who are just so willing to go, yeah, let's do it. And also some of my clients' partners. The partners are like, yeah, I don't mind having a conversation about when I had sex with my previous partners, or I don't mind talking about that holiday I went on with my previous partner, just to kind of trigger you so that we can sit with that feeling, and that's it, right? Is that we have to, rather than go along with the compulsion that's going to give you the short-term benefit, short-term dopamine relief, we need to practice sitting with this and being really bold and brave. And it really does help people unlock their world and move towards who they want to be. I don't want to be the partner who is Googling every time I hear my partner talk about this, or I don't want to be the person who is checking in every 5 minutes to see who they're talking to. Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, exposure work, also experimentation. You say it's the gold standard. ERP generally is to use, but there's been a little bit of a shift towards behavioral experiments. So testing out those predictions. If I don't message my partner, if I don't get safety, then bad things will happen. Well, let's see as well. So yeah, it's really hard, but that willingness to adapt our relationships with the intrusive thoughts, seeing them simply as distractions in my environment, and that willingness to sit with feeling uncomfortable and to reduce the compulsions can help people move in the right direction and be the partner they want to be in a relationship. So you can do that with therapists if you needed to. There's lots of therapists out there who can help. There's lots of self-help books as well. So this Relationship OCD book by Rajaee, that's Rajaee, is really helpful as well. So just some resources if people are interested. But yeah, if you are looking for a therapist, try and think about somebody who would be fully accredited by their governing body and who has worked with relationship OCD before, because it can be quite tricky. I have worked with a lot of people with relationship OCD, Tom, where they've had other therapy and it's kind of done deep dives into relationships and that person's understanding of relationships, and all that's done is led to more doubt. It hasn't treated the OCD necessarily.
Yeah, because if you follow OCD to the nth degree, it will always out the nth degree. You will always find another little crevice. And I always find you want to, as you said, it's not about going like second guessing it all the way back and answering every of its uncertainties. It's like just stepping back from the whole concept and thinking, I don't have to be hooked by this if I don't want to.
Exactly. So yeah, sometimes people can have many, many sessions exploring what relationships mean to them and where this comes from and why and their sort of attachment types and that kind of stuff. And sometimes instead that's just feeding the gremlin. The gremlin's like, oh yes, now Tom's giving this so much attention. This is great. And instead it's about just seeing the maintenance structure and undoing that.
Yeah.
I'm very conscious of the time. Should we think about wrapping up? Because people
we should.
Bored of hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, Tom. So let's finish up with a takeaway. What's your key message from this episode?
My key message from this episode is how easy it is to fall into a trap of thinking your relationship needs to be like, let's just say perfect. I'm sure there's other variants of words there, but perfect or whatever. But really, if you're going for longevity, which I imagine people are, generally speaking, that the points from that book, those questions you asked, are a far better gauge of the longevity of your relationship. If you can just focus in on those and ask those questions to yourself, I think it will alleviate a lot of that perceived pressure that you're feeling right now. I take a lot from that because I think it's very easy to fall into the trap of doubting your relationship too much and magnifying flaws too much. As long as you've got the basic components which were listed out in those questions, I really agree with that. That's just go with that.
Okay.
And everything else is noise. Everything else is just a distraction from what really matters, and to judge it by that.
That's a really nice way of putting it.
What about yours? What was your takeaway?
I think my key takeaway is just how hard it can be to differentiate between normal worries and doubts and relationship OCD. I really do think that's what makes this so much trickier than, I don't know, POCD, harm OCD, and it's so obvious that, that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about hurting somebody. Well, okay, and that's so far away from my values, where, relationships can have struggles. There can be so many different moving parts within relationships. So I really hope that this episode has helped people reflect on that a little bit and find some ways of teasing out a bit more, I don't want to say certainty, but awareness of what this might be for them. Yeah, so I think that's my key one.
Nice. Okay, let's do, should we set each other, I guess we'll set each other some homework, shall we? Since we have no guests to set us.
Yeah, I'm gonna, my homework is to read more of this book.
Yeah.
I've kind of dipped in and out of it and read the various chapters, but I've been busy, I've been ill, so just kind of getting to more of the later chapters where they do talk about exposure therapy a bit more, I think for me is where I'm going to go. What about yourself? Do you have any ideas?
I also want to read that book, and I want to reflect on those questions, and not that I'm experiencing relationship OCD at the moment, but I really do hold that I think there's a lot of value in just those, finding the fundamental pillars of your relationship. And I just want to read through that book and check in with myself.
Sounds great.
About where we are. Yeah.
And that'll help your clients too.
Definitely.
Really good.
Definitely.
Great. Well, look, thank you so much for staying with us. This has been a little longer than Tom and I expected. I think we were aiming for 50 minutes to an hour. We've gone over to 1 hour 10. I'm really sorry. We just like the sound of our own voices. But thank you so much for sticking with us. Do drop us a follow on Instagram. Come and seek us out. We're at Therapist in the Hot Seat _podcast. Give us a subscribe on YouTube if you can. If you haven't yet, go and check out our website. And if you want to buy us a coffee, buy us a coffee. We'd love to drink it during our next episode, which we don't know what we're doing yet, do we, Tom? We've kind of come to the end of our scheduling planning so far. So we need to put our heads together and have a little think about what we're going to do. If you've got any ideas or there's anything you want us to think about, please do drop us a message or a DM, and we will definitely think about doing that and see if we can get any guests for that as well.
Great. Yeah, well, thank you for taking the time to listen to us, guys. We hope it's been useful. Sorry for my Wi-Fi wobbles. I think I had a few during that, and I hope it doesn't mess up the listener experience.
It's fine, Tom. I'm professional enough to carry. So
I was thinking, I could hear you keeping going. I was like, that he's got it. He knows what the situation is. He's absolutely got it.
In the words of Freddie Mercury, the show must go on.
Try and sing it like Freddie.
No. I was going to.
I was thinking.
If I wasn't so congested, I will. I promise I'll do it. I think I did some Elvis a couple of episodes ago.
I think you did. That rings a bell.
Yeah, that's one of my go-to karaoke's. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. All the
See you soon, guys.